We in the United States tend to think about only the United States. And certainly we have the world's largest gambling market, casino legal gambling market. You know, we got to realize that our major competition is illegal gambling, and that's big everywhere, whether it's China or anywhere else. And there it varies by population. But for legal gambling, the country that leads the world is not the United States. It's not China. It's Australia. They have the highest per capita spend of any country on earth on gambling. They've had gambling for a very long time, and it's very, very local. What Australia did to start with is they created service clubs for their servicemen to provide, starting in after World War I, where the community wanted to provide support for returning veterans, and the government allowed the creation of these support clubs. Those clubs have evolved to include support for sports teams and other community activities. And one of the things that the government allowed these clubs to do in order to raise money was to have gambling devices. They can't have table games, but they can have slot machines. They call them pokies, but they're the very same machines as what's used in the United States and the rest of the world. We've found, I've been going to Australia now for over 30 years because we found that they have such a local clientele. People go to these clubs so frequently. Hundreds of people at a given club might go 200 times a year, and dozens of people might go over 300 times a year. And so we see incredible exposure and repetitiveness there, and that means that their offerings have to rise above what, say, they are on the Las Vegas Strip, where someone might come once every year or 2 years or 3 years. So we can go to Australia and we can learn things that will come to pass eventually in the United States. Tokenization, for example, the idea that you put in one denomination of money and choose how many cents each wager is worth, started in Australia. Spread here. Credit meters started there, spread here. Whole variety of things that we now take for granted were started in Australia. And what we're seeing in Australia now is the idea that the organization is being held accountable for customers that overspend. That they have this thing called harm minimization that is actually causing a diminishment of the number of clubs that are out there until this problem can be resolved, because the government's saying, gee, you're raising all this money for charity, and that's great, but you're also causing this harm. Well, we think that we can create an intervention, if you will, where when Kai senses that a customer is spending more than they normally do, perhaps more than they can afford, we can alert an employee that will go over to that customer and say, hey, would you like to take a break and get a beer? Would you like to take a break and get a cup of coffee? Never saying anything about overspending or underspending, to start a relationship in which the discussion about that overspending can happen. And that maybe we can create rewards and bonuses that would encourage that person, that the employee can give to that person, that would encourage that person to stop for the day and come back tomorrow. Because if we allow a person to spend more than they can afford and they have to go home to their spouse and say, I spent the rent money, I spent the grocery money, we're not doing ourselves any favors. We might have made a little bit more money on that one day, but we're turning others against us. We're going to have a spouse that says, don't go there anymore. We're going to have interventions from family. We're going to have interventions from the whole community that's going to rise up against us and say, this is bad. In Australia, we did some interviews with frequent players that tell us how much they like to gamble, but how reluctant they are to share their love of gambling with their friends because of the humiliation and ridicule that they'll suffer by saying that they gamble. Because people say, well, that's for idiots, that's for fools, that's dangerous, that's bad. Well, yeah, gambling costs money, but so does going to a movie. If I go to see Star Wars, I got to pay my money. I got to get extorted for popcorn or whatever it is. Everything that we do, every service, every entertainment that we undertake requires a fee. Gambling is an entertainment fee unless we allow it to get out of control. We do want to have a certain amount of variability in what a customer can spend, but it is our responsibility, if we want to grow, to start to measure how much someone can afford and make sure that they're living within their budget. And there's no better place to measure that than in Australia, where we have high frequency. What we learn in Australia, we can bring back here. We want to make gambling to be an activity that no one objects to, that no one tries to make illegal, that no one is ashamed to do, that people are going, yeah, I'll go to the casino with you. That sounds like fun. Instead of, oh, I don't want to go there. I might spend too much money. I might get addicted or whatever it is. We have to make that gambling environment safe, and we can do that first in Australia.